r/pro revenge. Ex-girlfriend was a scammer, so I put her in the slammer. Bippity boppity boo. I destroyed her family too. Around the time that I got my first full-time job and finished college, I decided I was ready to venture out and start dating. I had heard about this amazing app through a few of my co-workers, a little thing called Tinder, so I decided to give it a shot. After about a week on the app, I finally matched with a woman who we will call Talia. Talia lived in a different city than I did, but the day we matched, she said she was visiting a cousin. We messaged through the app, and after verifying she was real through her Facebook and Instagram profiles, we exchanged phone numbers. She said she was employed full-time, had an apartment and her own car, and was somehow still single. We talked for about 2 weeks on the phone, always at night after my shift at work, before we finally had a chance to meet when our schedules matched up. I drove my beat-up 1996 Honda Civic to her town, spent that Friday night. I forget where we ate that night, and in the morning we had breakfast at Waffle House. Talia did have her own apartment, however. She lived next door to her grandmother, who I awkwardly had to meet the next morning. I learned from Talia that her car was actually in her grandmother's name and her apartment was in the name of her cousin. She went so far as to show me family portraits with her cousin, to talk about her abusive ex, and even shared with me how her laundry room was embarrassingly infested with flies and roaches. We officially changed our social media to dating that day. Keep in mind that this was my first relationship in almost 4 years, so I was excited. The scam. Talia also told me that day that she had been fired from work about a week earlier but was too embarrassed to tell me. I asked how she had kept up her bills and she said that her grandma and dad had been helping her. Talia asked if I could help her make her car payment, which was due that weekend. I refused. She then explained that she could get a payday loan, which is banned in our state, and could put it into my checking account. I felt uneasy about it and asked if there was another way she could get the loan. Talia said that she couldn't use her grandma or dad's accounts because they had burned her in the past. I thought it was weird, but she started crying. So I called my bank, where I had an account since high school graduation, and opened a linked checking account. I gave Talia the new checking account number and routing number. Talia contacted a payday loan company in Alabama, and by Sunday morning, she had the funds in my linked checking account. Per our agreement, I gave her the money. Talia promised to repay the loan within 2 weeks. I had my reservations but went back home and back to work Monday. Talia called me on Wednesday and said she had a new job. I asked if she had the payday loan squared away with her first paycheck. She said she did, but I still got charged $47 2 weeks after she set up the loan. I called my bank, called Talia to verify the loan was going through her, and terminated the charge from the payday loan as I was not the signed person. Talia and I agreed to meet Memorial Day weekend 2 weeks later. She stated that her dad had given her a check for the entire loan amount, $1,800, and that she would deposit it into my bank near her. Like a fool, I let her deposit the check right before Memorial Day weekend. 2 weeks later, the payday loan company charged another $47 plus penalty fees and another $47. The $1,800 check bounced. Talia stopped answering her calls and blocked me on everything. I called my bank and informed them that I was a victim of fraud. Within hours, my main checking account, into which my paycheck had gone, my savings account, with $800 saved for a new car, and the new checking account were closed. My best friend from college, we'll call him Clark, found Talia had 2 of every social media account. The one she shared with me and the one on which she had a boyfriend. Her cousin from her family photos was actually her boyfriend since high school. Talia was 22, 23. Her boyfriend, we'll call him Jason, was in prison, but from their social media posts, she was visiting him once a month, minimum, and had plans to marry him. I spent days trying to get back my accounts and my money. One of the representatives from my bank, and Clark and my mom, advised that I should press charges for fraud. My bank mailed me a copy of the bounced check for criminal investigation purposes, and it showed Jason's name and not Talia's father's name as the owner of the check. That's when I decided to get revenge. The revenge, as mentioned before. Talia's apartment had a minor infestation of roaches and flies in her laundry room. While I went through legal agencies to pursue pressing charges of forgery on the check, fraud, etc., I found the name and phone number of Talia's apartment complex. I left a message for the apartment complex management that Talia and her grandmother both had filthy apartments. Within a week, Clark showed me that Talia had posted a request for temporary housing for her and her grandma, since her parents wouldn't let her move in. Talia's payday loan company began calling me, as Talia had given them my phone number instead of hers and they had not received payment yet. I was still reviewing my legal options at the time. One day, I answered and notified the rep that Talia had fraudulently used my checking account. The rep who called me transferred me to their legal department, who was very interested. It turned out that Talia's grandma and her father owed to the payday loan company. It wasn't a lot separately, but the payday loan company had enough evidence, with my claim, that Talia was the ringleader using her family's accounts. Throw out my food and lie? Okay, you're going to jail for assault. You might remember me from my post a month or so ago. I dumped and kicked out my now ex-girlfriend for secretly stealing and throwing out several $100s worth of my food. A few years into our relationship, my girlfriend watched, and subsequently made me watch, an awful movie called What the Health. This led to her going vegan and constantly trying to force me to go vegan. I am a hobbyist athlete and bodybuilder, and going vegan isn't viable for me. I love meat and milk and I need my protein. About 260 grams per day of it. Anyway, after several months of her being insane, my milk and meat started disappearing from my fridge and raising my suspicions. I eventually caught her on camera after months of her lying to me. She threw out a total of about $400 worth of food. When all was said and done, this brings us to yesterday. She's been reaching out talking about trying to get back together. This is after she literally made a Facebook group claiming that I abused her. I would absolutely never do that. Disgusting lies. And told close friends and family all kinds of horrible stories about me. I decided I was gonna get some revenge for her thievery and trying to duck my life up. I invited her over for dinner last night, telling her I had since gone vegan. I cooked her dinner and she made it clear she regretted nothing and just had to make me see the light about going vegan. So I gritted my teeth and cooked her some tofu tacos with my new recipe, mimicking chipotle sofritas. She ate 2 plates and loved it so much that she demanded the recipe. She continued being extremely rude and admitted that everything she said about me had been a lie, but that she was very hurt and determined to hurt me too. I recorded our entire conversation on my old iPhone. She tries to get frisky with me after dinner and I tell her, let me write down the recipe for you before I forget. I write down the words ground turkey on an index card and give it to her with a wide smile on my face. She starts freaking the duck out. Now I had already told my neighbor that, if he hears any screaming, to call the cops. I knew her reaction would be insane because she is an insane person. Long story short, the cops came as she was hitting me in the face repeatedly in the parking lot of my condo. She got arrested for assault. I took video and put it on Facebook, tagging everyone who was in her Facebook group slandering me. I also added the audio of her admitting all the stories she told about me had been lies. How I made the worst employer in the world lose a multi-million-dollar account. To be honest, the I in the title is not me, but a former colleague who does not have a Reddit account. We worked together in the same ad agency. I will give my personal context first and then write her story exactly as she told me. We worked together in one of the biggest ad agencies in my country. She was a director and I was a manager in different departments. It was a global group, but it honestly sucked. I quit because I was burned out. It had a Game of Thrones politics and daily occurrences of both sexual and moral harassment. That place was the worst professional experience and one of the worst personal ones I have ever had. Duck them. Now for the story. It is a long one. English not our first language. Mobile. This happened in 2017. I was hired as an account director for a huge ad agency. Let's call it FFC. My account was one of the top 5 accounts in the agency and was worth at least 7 digits. My boss, the accounts VP, was one of the worst human beings I have ever met. He was sexist, rude and liked to play favorites. When I got there, as a young and okay looking woman, I instantly became one of his faves. He was married BTW. One day we left a happy hour together and he offered me a ride. I lived nearby him, so not overthinking it I accepted. He made a move on me. I politely refused and left the car. After that, my life became a living hell. He would not include me in important meetings and then complain I didn't know things that were discussed. My reviews went from 5 stars to 1. He pretended he didn't remember a raise he had promised. He would talk with my team and ignore me. The work, which was already hard, I worked 80 a week, became unbearable. I almost quit. I had a long conversation with the agency HR, which went nowhere, because she was his personal friend. I even escalated it to the president, with whom I had a friendly relationship, and he said I was reading too much into things. One thing I did right though is that I had a great relationship with my client, so they were afraid to fire me. I had helped save the account, which was almost lost when I was hired. So, they played a smart hand. They hired a girl who had worked with my client on his former company, with whom he had a friendly relationship with, to replace me. They then put me aside on a smaller account, which was on the verge of being lost, so they could justify firing me when that happened. But then I got lucky. My original client got promoted and opened a marketing manager position under him. When I applied, he even skipped a few hiring steps. This was October and I was to start on January. I asked him not to disclose to the agency he had hired me until I had the chance to tell them myself. The position would not work directly with the ad agency and I no longer managed their account, so there was no conflict of interest and he said okay. Honestly, he couldn't care less. I was planning on giving them my 1-month notice, required in my country, on November, so they could have time to find someone else. I was fired the 31st of October. It would have been the worst experience in the world if I cared. The VP asked me in his office to fire me. He said no one would believe me, that I would never find another job in the market, that I had ratted him out to HR, that I was incompetent and all the worst things someone could have said. He sent me to HR to sign some papers and told me to leave the building afterwards. I recorded him. When I went to HR, the woman in charge sat me down and kept making snark comments about me not appreciating working in one of the biggest ad agencies in the world, that I could have been great. It was surreal. Being fired in my country grants people a fair amount of money. I would have received around 5 salaries per the law. She wanted me to sign papers accepting that. I said no, and played her the record from the VP. She went pale because she knew that was a lawsuit, and also that the global team would not like it at all. I left that day and said I would contact them through my lawyer. Never said anything about the job lined up. The next week my lawyer, my recording and a bunch of other documents, emails, text messages, sat down with the agency to negotiate. I ended up with over 15 salaries. Both parts signed a NDA, which included me saying I had quit. I then took a 2-month vacation, told my new boss I had made a deal while quitting, but that I had not disclosed I was going to work for them. He said he would tell them himself. Not to worry. Comes January and I start at my new job. My boss then tells me that, since I was the one with the most experience in advertising agencies, I would be a consultant to the annual deals for all the agencies that managed all their accounts. This included allowing new agencies to pitch for us. My boss, which didn't deal with FFC anymore, of course forgot to tell them about me. No feeling in the world was better than entering the agency as a client. It was almost orgasmic sitting in a meeting to see their pitch and watching the VP dumbstruck face when he entered the room. I was nothing but nice, made pertinent questions and smiled all the way through. I ended up telling my boss in confidence what had happened. He authorized me to advise against the agency, said that if compliance knew about their behavior they would lose the account anyway. They lost the account. They lost 3 other accounts in that same year. The whole leadership was fired. The agency closed earlier this year. The VP can't find a job for his life, and I just got promoted. Bro, you made it to the end? You're a ducking mad lad. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price.